Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Bickford. Welcome back to another episode of Carolina Rides. This is the Scott Hoke slash Mecum Auctions episode part two. Before we get too much into that, I do want to remind everybody the previous episode and all the other episodes we've done are up on YouTube at Carolina Rides WSPA. If you have any questions about anything or have any ideas for future guests, or maybe just want to mention something or ask any questions, really, you can hit us up on Facebook at Carolina Rides or on Instagram at Carolina Rides Official WSPA. I'd like to welcome back for week two, Scott Hoke. We're in the middle now of the Kissimmee auction. The second week of it is beginning. And usually when you have the big auctions, you guys, like Kissimmee and Indianapolis, when you get to that second week, that's when you start dealing with some of the heavy hitters. I just recently got in the mail this poster, courtesy of Mecum. And each one of these thumbnails is a car that is going across the block. And you know what? There's more on the other side. And these are where some of the special collections are. In fact, if this one right here in yellow, I believe that is all red and yellow Ferraris. We were talking about that off camera a little bit, the Bachmann collection.
Oh, my goodness, where to begin? That collection is astounding. It is mind-numbing. A guy named Phil Bachmann, who was a dealer, a car dealer, and in fact, at one time, I think the youngest Cadillac dealer in the country in Tennessee, decided that he was in love with Ferraris and began collecting some of these Ferraris and got to the point where the guys at Ferrari had him on speed dial, and he had the same. This collection is 46 Ferraris, and they represent really some of the finest examples of the prancing horse lineage, and going back over the last 65 years. Two 1992 F40s, a 1995 F50, two LaFerraris, even a 2017 F12 TDF with 68 miles on it. And you're scrolling up and you can see some of these amazing cars. And the interesting thing about them is many of them are kind of bespoke cars, especially some of the newer ones, with the factory personalization department. And basically that's when Phil Bachmann said, hey, I'd like you to make the seat belts this color, or I want the last Ferrari FXX that you're going to build, or I want this, or I want that. And they said, okay, sure, no problem. And that is the level of each one of these cars. The fact that they're selling at no reserve, and we just announced that shortly after our Kansas City auction, that is unbelievable. I mean, the collection is going to be, 46 cars is going to take well over an hour. And these are some of the finest and most desirable Ferraris on the planet right now, and all coming out of the same collection.
Yeah, I'd imagine you said well and over an hour. When you consider, especially since it's no reserve, you don't have that bound that you're trying to shoot. So you're just going to kind of let it go and try to get more bidding action on it and let it go and let it go. Because I've seen some situations where you'll want to make sure that that goes for as much as it can. And sometimes it seems like longer, but it's probably, like 5 minutes a car can be up there on the block.
Well, and that's a really good point. A lot of times the no reserve cars go a lot quicker than the cars with a reserve. But in this situation, because these cars are so valuable and so desirable, I would anticipate there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in every single one of them. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to get through all those 46 cars. And I should point out too that there are a couple of Alfa Romeo 8Cs in that group as well. 48 cars in that entire Bachmann collection.
Now, another thing that we also had talked about kind of off air here a little bit outside of that collection is what you say is the holy grail of this entire auction. Tell me a little about this Ferrari.
Well, I'll go even further. It is the holy grail of holy grails. It is quite simply one of the most desirable sports cars, race cars, ever. Uh, and generally speaking, we're talking about the Ferrari 250 GTO. This one from 1962, one of only 24 that was built in that year, 36 overall, and the only one in white, which is remarkable. And you can see on the video that you're right now, you know, a lot of people, when you mention Ferrari, immediately a red car comes to mind, or a yellow car, or a black car. This is the only one of those 36 that was ever built in white from the factory. It's been repainted a couple times, but it's been brought back to the original factory color, and it is just, oh my gosh, it takes your breath away when you think about the desirability and the rarity of these cars, and the fact that they were raced. This car was driven by Graham Hill, and has been in long-term ownership um, since I think 1999. And so many things about this car make it exceptionally valuable and exceptionally rare. And it will be an, I guarantee you it's going to be a Mika moment when it comes across the auction block.
Yeah, right at the top of this on the website, I mean, it says maintained, repaired, refinished, but never restored.
And that, in my opinion, adds to the desirability of the car. All these cars, they've all been dinged. They've all been, you know, raced and quote unquote beaten up just a little bit. I mean, they've all had little defects that have been repaired. That's not unusual. I mean, that's the way it is with a lot of these cars. But to have one that's in this good of condition still, without having undergone a complete restoration, that is in and of itself remarkable.
Where do you see this car in the pantheon of some of the other heavy hitters and some of the other big cars Mecum has had through the years, in terms of where that may stand, not only in terms of what it goes for, but just in terms of the fact that, you know, you mentioned this, there's dents, there's things. This car has character. This car tells a story.
Well, where I see it in the history of Mecum auctions, there is no other car that even comes close to this one, period. That's how important and valuable and desirable this car is. We are thrilled that we have the opportunity to sell this car in Kissimmee in just a few days, and the eyes, Dan, the eyes of the entire car collecting world will be fixed on Kissimmee on Saturday, January 17th, when this car comes across the block. And I'm not afraid to tell you that I think I've got one of the best seats in the house as we bring it to you on ESPN Plus, and we'll be live when that car crosses the block.
Now, that was a powerful, definitive answer right there. What are some of the other cars and some of the other collections that have kind of caught your eye?
Well, there are a couple of Ford GT40s from 1965 and 1966. There is a 1971 Hemi Cuda convertible with an automatic, very rare car. That's going to be a seven-figure car. One of the collections that, if I have a minute, I want to tell you about, it's the My Garage Museum collection. And My Garage, MY, also stands for Mike Yeager. And this is a collection, not a lot of cars, 8 cars, but the road art, the memorabilia in the My Garage collection is just unfathomable. Some of these things are so rare, and things that you've never seen before. More than 5,000 pieces of road art, so much in fact that Mecum has actually had an on time online auction going on for quite some time, since before the first of the year. Now the 8 cars are pretty significant. There are 2 Corvette ZR1s including a 1989 ZR1 prototype. And if you're familiar with the Corvette, you know that that ZR1 did not come out until 1990. So this is a pre-production prototype, and it's coming out of that My Garage collection. Some folks who are ardent viewers or attendees of our event might recognize the name Cliff Ernst. And, this is proof that a collection does not have to be massive to be massively important. Okay. The Cliff Ernst collection is just 10 cars. 6 of them, however, are 1969 Yenko Camaros. And one of those is the very first Yenko Camaro prototype pilot test car. There's also a 69 Yenko Deuce. There's that prototype. You've just spotlighted that one. There's a Yenko Deuce, 1969 and 1969 Trans Am. There's a GT500 KR that's in the upper right-hand corner of the screen right there. And you can see one of only 517 built in that middle of the model year release in 1968. And Cliff always brings high quality cars with him to an auction. And as you can see, man, oh man, these are some, if you're a Camaro guy, if you have an affinity for Don Yenko machines, this is the collection that you want to be focusing on. And they're all coming up on Saturday, and it is going to be absolutely a barn burner.
We're going to take a short break. We will be back with more about kind of how the behind the scenes things work at Mecum Auctions, especially when it comes to the broadcast and some of the great moments that have come across the block as well. Stay with Carolina Rides. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Carolina Rides. Scott Hoke with us once again for the second part of this episode. And we've talked a lot about the Kissimmee auction. Let's kind of spread the blanket out a little bit and just talk about kind of how, because these auctions not only are car museums, they're actual live auctions, but they're also a place where, to some extent, I guess, magic happens. Where we have had in the past great collections that have crossed, single great automobiles. Tell me a little bit about some of the cars that stick out in your mind from some of the previous auctions that are just like wowzers.
Well, I think one of the first cars that comes to mind is a car that really captured the attention of not only the car collector world, but the film world, the motorcycle world, and just Americana. And that was in 2019 when Mecum sold the Bullitt Mustang, which was part of what most people would call the greatest movie chase scene in history from the film Bullitt. And it was not a flashy car. It wasn't shiny. In fact, they roughed it up for the film. They couldn't have Steve McQueen, driving around in a brand new, he was a police detective, and they couldn't have him driving around in a brand new, flashy, shiny Mustang. So they made it look older. But that car, there you go. That car was the car from Bullitt, and it sold for $3.4 million overall. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner as well. And it just really superseded the car collector world. Anything that Steve McQueen had his hands on is going to be very, very desirable. That is one of the cars. We had Jerry Lee Lewis's 1959 Harley Davidson FLH on the auction block in Kissimmee. I want to say 2015 on NBC at the time. And this is a motorcycle that was gifted to Jerry Lee Lewis by Harley Davidson. There were 2 that were gifted, one to Jerry Lee and one to Elvis. And when it came time for Jerry Lee to sell his motorcycle, he came to Mecum. We were thrilled with that. And the motorcycle, $40,000, $50,000 as it stands. went across the block. I'm not making this up. Jerry Lee Lewis came out. We got a piano for him. He sang Goodness Gracious, Great Balls of Fire live in front of our audience and the audience watching on television. And the motorcycle sold for 330,000, I think, and you see 385 with all the commissions and things afterwards. But that was the connection of one of rock and roll's all-time greats to that motorcycle. Much like the connection of Steve McQueen to the Bullitt Mustang. And one other moment that I think was incredible was a few years ago. I think it was 2022. We had a 1936 Yellowstone tour bus, Yellowstone National
Oh,
Park
I
tour
remember
bus.
that.
You remember this?
Yes.
It was originally for Yellowstone, but it had been recommissioned to go to Glacier National Park, painted red. The pre-auction estimate was somewhere between $250,000 and $400,000. Just a piece of Americana history, and we were astounded when this bus sold for way over $1 million, as you can see on your screen. It was absolutely incredible, the attention and the interest in this bus. And it, goes back to how many people have ridden these tour buses in the national park systems. And Glacier actually still has a fleet of these buses that are on the road in their national park. It's incredible. What a piece of Americana that is.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Jerry Lee Lewis because we have over time, I know Mecum has seen several celebrities or NASCAR drivers either come through with cars they're selling or cars they want to buy. I know you've had them and interviewed some of them up on the desk there. I mean, you get some people who we see all the time who are like, somebody like Tim Wellborn, for example, because he's got the Muscle
Sure.
Car Museum. But then you have the likes of, say, a Reggie Jackson or one time even Lou Gramm or something like that. When they are interested or they're in the house, obviously if they're consigning, they're going to be around. But if they're just wandering on in to buy something, how does that work in terms of, somebody gets in your ear and says, hey, so-and-so's here. Do you want to talk to them?
Well, yes, it happens. Sometimes guys show up that we didn't even know about. I remember in Houston a number of years ago, Don Chaney, the former head coach of the Houston Rockets, was just, off the side of the block. And I looked over, having worked for an NBA franchise, the Indiana Pacers. I saw Don over there, and I mentioned to one of our other guys, I said, that might be a good interview. And it turns out it was. He was just there looking at cars. Reggie is a frequent customer. We had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar selling a car last year in 2024 at Monterey. You mentioned Lou Gramm, the former lead singer of Foreigner. We've had Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick in our booth. Tony Stewart, my good buddy from many, many years ago, he was in the booth with us not long ago. Hockey players, baseball players. Jensen Button, the former Formula One world champion, bought a car at our Pomona auction a number of years ago. So there are definitely celebrities that do turn up. Sometimes we don't even know about them until after they've left the building. But it's always fun to spot somebody in the audience that everybody knows and know that they share our passion for collectible automobiles.
I'd like to throw in my candidate for one of my favorite moments. It was the sale of the Black Ghost.
Oh, yeah.
That was, and some of it was I had already known about the car. I had first heard about the car actually reading about it because there was an article in the Haggerty Drivers Club magazine about that, probably about a year, maybe 2 years before that crossed the block. So, watching auctions and then seeing that, it's like, wow, that's the car. And the car was so special, Mopar ended up making more of them at the end of the Challenger.
Absolutely right. And that was a car, for those who don't know, was owned by a gentleman in Detroit, and Godfrey Qualls, I believe was his name. And it became legendary because he would take it out on the street, race it, and beat everybody and then just keep driving into the night. And that's kind of how it got its nickname, the Black Ghost. It had a gator, yeah, there it is, the gator grain top, and which was a mistake. Actually, he didn't order it that way, but he left it on there once the car arrived. And yeah, that was very cool. And to see, I saw that at the McCacken show the year before we knew that we were going to have it in our auction. And just to see that little piece of Detroit street racing history was pretty cool. One other car that I think really caught my attention, Dan, a number of years ago, was the McNamara Corvette, a 1967 big block Corvette coupe, 4-speed, white with a red stinger. The gentleman who owned it originally bought it when he came back from Vietnam and wanted to have a cool car. And I think he spent $5,000 on it or whatever, lived out in Colorado, I believe, and was kind of a hermit, kept to himself, didn't drive it a lot. And never restored it. Didn't need to because the car was in perfect condition. He kept it under a blanket under cover. Make a long story short, he told everybody that he had gotten rid of it, but he actually kept it, drove it very sparingly. And this is, I think, a little bit more than 10 years or so ago. He left the odometer, left the car at 2,996 miles. He didn't want it to go over 3,000. Passed away, gave it to his neighbor who didn't even know the car existed. And ultimately, it came to our auction, and a car that, maybe worth a couple $100,000 sold for $725,000. And you're taking a look at it right there. Just a remark. That's a case, and we see this so often, a case of the car is valuable, yes, but the story behind the car makes it just so much more valuable than the car itself.
Yeah, I love the cars with the stories, which is why I was attracted to the Black Ghost. Outside of the cars themselves, what are some of the Mecum moments over the years that have really gotten your attention? Whether it be an emotional buying, an emotional selling, anything like that.
Well, um, I'll tell you a story of my own personal experience. Many of our excuse me, many of our viewers may know that almost a year ago to this day, we lost our longtime color commentator and my partner, John Craman. There he is, after a very short battle with leukemia. And the most emotional moment that I've ever had was being able to drive his C8 2020 Elkhart Lake Blue metallic Corvette onto the auction block as it was the as it was the first car in his collection that we sold in Indianapolis in middle of May of 2025. And I will be honest with you, Dan, I was driving his car through a lot of tears at that point, and it was such an honor. His wife, Christine, you see her there. That's at the McCacken show in Chicago. His wife, Christine, was with me, and his granddaughter, Ava, was in the passenger seat as well. And that was as emotional, the most emotional that I've ever been at a Mecum auction. And it's because of my partner. We were so sad at that point to see him go, and to be asked to drive that car across the block was a very, very high honor for me.
I mean, that may have been a coworker, but it's literally like family, and we can really tell with the broadcast, the way you interact, particularly with Bill. That I mean, these are people who you kind of love.
No kind of about it. You're right. It is a family, and I joked that I spent more time with John. Sometimes it felt like I spent more time with John over the course of 17 years than I did with my own parents. And so, yeah, he was like my brother. I mean, we did a lot of things uh, that were away from the auction block and had really nothing to do with cars, but it's the cars that brought us together. And that was one of our shared passions. So I miss him every day. And I think about him every day. And that will continue through the rest of my life.
Yeah, and all your hardcore viewers miss John as well. Scott, I would like to thank you very much for joining me for these last two episodes and delving into Mecum Kissimmee.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity to join you, and let's do it again sometime soon, shall we?
All right. In fact, maybe I'll visit you next time. Well,
Hey, I will look for you on the block. How about
yeah,
that?
I will be there, or at least, pulling us like, hey, remember me? Remember me? And you'll be like, who is that? Scott, thanks once again for joining us. And for you viewers, thanks for joining us once again on Carolina Rides. We'll see you next time. Until then, drive safely.